Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be me ranking all the mythic heroes, including Plumeria, on a tier list, and this was heavily inspired by SwiftC on YouTube. He has a series of ranking videos, and I will link his channel in the description so that you guys can check out his channel as well. So yeah, I saw him ranking the mythics, and I noticed there were a couple things that I personally felt differently based on my experience, so I decided to make my own tier list, including Plumeria, that is just going to basically describe how I feel about the different mythic heroes in the current meta. First off, I'll be ranking Plumeria, who is our new Astra mythic hero. Now, because of the fact that she's a dancer, she's automatically going to be top tier, especially since considering in Astra season, Naga and Altina don't have amazing support capabilities, so it's going to be really nice for a lot of people who have been struggling in Astra season to now be able to use a dancer. And her stat line doesn't really matter that much, same as with Peony, because neither of them is going to expect to be in combat very frequently at all. All that matters is her support capabilities. So she has dance, she's a dancer, which is obviously super important in Ether raids because that frees up your extra slot so that you can run a different support unit who is not a dancer. So for example, you could run someone like a Versa and a dancer on the team, which is going to be really helpful. So I'm going to have to put her in the top tier, in S tier, because she's a dancer, so immediately that's going to make her top tier regardless of what her stats are, and she's also an Astra hero, which is going to be a big relief for a lot of people who are using Naga and or Altina in Astra season. So for that reason, she is definitely top tier. Next up, we have Altina, who was handed out to players for free a while back. She was the second Astra mythic, and she is a sword flyer. Now, she is a pretty good standalone unit, especially with a lot of merges. Like, she can do some vantage sweeping pretty well, and she's a pretty decent tank since her defense and res are so high, but to be honest, you need to invest in her pretty heavily with merges and premium skills to make her viable. As just a +0 unit, she's not amazing, and she gives attack +3 as her mythic boost, which is also not that useful, especially in Astra season. If you're trying to use a tank, running Altina is not that helpful. I've personally been having to run 2 Altinas in Astra season since I never pulled a Naga, and let me tell you, it is not fun dragging around 2 sword flyers like Altina, who are honestly a little bit of a dead weight. Because of the fact that Altina has limited in combat use without proper investment, and the fact that she really has no support capabilities, I'm gonna have to put her in B tier. She's not quite bottom tier, because if you give her like the deflect magic steal, she can actually deal with Thrasir pretty well, but honestly, she isn't that useful overall. And because she has no support capabilities whatsoever, she really can't be that high tier. Next up is Naga, who is the first Astra mythic actually to be introduced. And she is not that good, to put it simply. Her main utility comes from being able to provide the dragon effectiveness, which is helpful with killing people like Duma, but unfortunately outside of that, she is really quite frail, so a lot of the time you'll see people one-shotting her, especially since she is a flyer. So any archer for sure will one-shot her, and I've seen people who are not archers as well one-shot her. So she's not very useful in combat, she often gets one-shotted, so you can't really leave her in the way of anyone, and I guess sometimes you can make her soak Bright Shrine with her pretty decent attack and speed, but even then it requires a decent amount of investment into her attack and speed stats to do that. Because of her limited support capability and non-existent offensive prowess, I'm gonna have to put her in C tier. Now, I'm sure I've seen some pretty good Nagas, like at +10 with distant counter, IO's shield, you know, all the really good stuff, but for most people who would just have her at +0 or maybe +1, she's really not going to be that useful, and I would probably recommend sticking to Plumeria and Altina if you have a choice for Astra season. Moving on to Light season. First up, we have Peony, who was the second light hero introduced. Now, she is a dancer, she's a ranged dancer who's also a flyer, and she was distributed to everyone for free. And she is honestly super useful, so her dance skill is arguably better than Plumeria's because it also provides an orders buff, which can be really useful for maneuvering in Ether raids, and her the passive from her weapon, which grants attack speed +3 to people in cardinal directions during combat. Now, she is amazing, I'm sure everyone knows this already. She will pretty much never be seeing combat anyway, so her stats are not important because she is a dancer, and because everyone has her, most people are probably going to be using her in Light season. Because of the virtue of being a dancer and also having a pretty unique weapon and dance skill, Peony is going to be top tier just like Plumeria. Now, they're basically two sides of a coin in Astra and Light Season. They both provide speed +4, they're both dancers with fairly similar concepts behind their design. So yeah, Peony is just a really amazing option, and there's pretty much no reason why you wouldn't want to run Peony in Light Season. Next up is Mila, who was the third light mythic to be introduced. She is an infantry, which actually sets her apart from all the other offense mythics who are currently all flyers. And because of her extremely high defense and res, and the fact that she's not a flyer, that means she's probably going to be able to survive hits from ranged physical units. So she's not going to die to a bow like pretty much any of the other mythics are going to do. She has really amazing defense and res, so she's going to be able to soak things like Dark Shrine and chill defense and res. And obviously her isolation effect is so powerful. Being able to shut down dancers on the opposing team is invaluable in ether raids, especially when dancers are probably the biggest cancer in ether raids, because sometimes it could be unpredictable how they're going to move and who they're going to dance. So Mila's super helpful with that. It usually makes the AI mess up a little because they just kind of move randomly, and because of her high defense and res, she is going to use Mila's turn wheel really, really well. She also provides you with one extra turn on Ether Raid's offense, which can be super helpful because you can have maps where you almost time out, and maybe if you had just had one extra turn you would have been able to win, and it can also help with getting the pots more reliably. So because of that, I'm going to have to put Mila in top tier as well. She is not a dancer, so she's probably not quite as useful as Peony, but her isolation effect is just so powerful, along with the adding one extra turn, that it just makes her such a good unit to use in Ether Raids, and because of that, I'm going to put her in the top tier. Finally, from Light Season, we have Air, who is the OG Mythic Queen. She was also distributed to everyone for free, just like Peony was, and she is a pretty good unit. Doesn't have much combat ability. She does have decent attack and speed, but because she targets defense, she's not going to be getting a lot of kills. She also comes with Sparkling Boost, which is quite unique as a C-slot and can be pretty supportive if you use it properly, especially if you don't have a healing tower, if you don't want to run that structure on offense. So because of that, she is quite good. I would consider her still to be one of the better mythic heroes. However, right now, because we have both Mila and Peony, who are very top tier, there's really not much reason to use Air over one of those two, unless you happen to have a lot of merges on your Air from before, so that you might score a little bit better. Because of that, I'm going to put Air in the A tier, which is the second highest tier. I do think she is a rung below Peony and Mila, however, she's still quite good. So that's why I have her up fairly high, but not too high. Moving on to Astra Season, I'm going to start off talking about Thrasir, aka the reason why I can no longer use my +10 max investment Fae in Astra Season. Because of her dragon effectiveness, she has basically single-handedly ended the potential to use a dragon tank in Astra Season, which is honestly really annoying because I know people like Fallen Corrin, Fae, Noe, a lot of people were using dragon tanks in Ether Raids in Astra Season. So now, unless you have Spring Idun, who is able to get rid of the dragon effectiveness, pretty much nobody is running dragon tanks in Astra Season anymore because Thrasir is just too good. She has a really amazing stat line, great attack, great speed, great weapon. Her B slot killing intent is also insane. So she is honestly really, really good on, especially on infantry pulse teams. If you can have her special ready already, she is just going to wreck. She is so good. Because of her insane offensive ability and ability to fit into an infantry pulse team seamlessly, I'm going to put her in S tier. She is just such an offensive powerhouse, and a lot of people still struggle with her despite the fact that she is so common now. Next up is Mirabilis. Much like her two other fairy friends, she is also going to be a dancer. However, she is a defensive mythic instead of an offensive one. She is really useful because having a dancer who also reduces the lift you lose can be really helpful because it lets you free up another slot on your defense team instead of having to use a dancer plus a mythic. She is the dancer and the mythic, so you can add someone else more offensive to your team or whoever you want, really. She is really good just by the virtue of being a dancer, and actually her stat line is quite interesting as well. Because she's so slow, she probably won't be killing many people, but she is really tanky, which helps her soak things like Dark Shrine. Because of the fact that she's a dancer and she's pretty good overall, I'm gonna have to put her in S tier. Having someone who is both a mythic and a dancer is just so invaluable in any season, so because of that, she is top tier in my eyes. Next up is Lif or Leaf. I'm not quite sure which one is correct, so I'm just gonna call him Leaf. He is a sword infantry, so because of the fact that he's an infantry, that means that he can fit in pretty well onto infantry pulse teams, and he can give infantry pulse to other people if he would want. Even on his own, he's already coming with Times Pulse and Open the Future, which is going to make him a fairly decent offensive threat. And although he has low speed, he makes up for that with his guaranteed double from his weapon as long as he's within 3 spaces of an ally. So in that sense, he can be pretty decent offensively. However, he is really weak whenever you manage to separate him from the rest of his team, so he's really not that hard to tank or to play around, in my opinion. Because of his fairly decent combat potential, but not much else, I'm gonna have to put him in B tier. He's really not that strong, and it's pretty easy to play around him. However, he does provide the infantry pulse utility, and sometimes he can probably kill maybe a unit if you catch the other team off guard. Last but not least is the OG Astra Mythic, and actually the OG Defense Mythic. He was the very first Defense Mythic to ever be introduced. It is Duma. He is an armored dragon with a pretty good niche overall. Because he has upheaval, he's acting as a catapult, which is really useful, and his weapon actually doesn't allow people to double him unless they're at 100% HP, so if you didn't bring along an armor slayer or a dragon slayer who can easily one-shot him, it might be hard to kill him if you're not at 100% HP, which is pretty likely considering that he deals 7 damage at the start of turn 1. So unless you have a healing tower that wasn't destroyed by Duma's upheaval, you could be in trouble and you pretty much won't be able to double him. However, a lot of people do bring along armor slayers or dragon slayers, so he is fairly easy to one-shot in that sense, especially if you're using Naga. She turns anyone into a dragon slayer, so there's that. He does come with Bold Fighter, which can actually net him a kill once in a while, especially if you pair him up with something like Armored Boots and a Dancer. He can actually sometimes run amok and actually kill someone. So he's pretty decent overall, I would say. When he first came out, I probably would have said he was top tier, but now with so many different counters and a lot of people planning around Duma, I'm gonna have to put him in B tier. He is pretty decent, but it is fairly easy to kill him, especially since Naga is a mythic during the season that he is in defense. So because of that, I'm gonna have to put him near the bottom, but not quite at the very bottom. Moving on to Dark Season, I'm gonna start off with Bramimond. They are just so insanely good in Fire Emblem Heroes. They have insanely high attack, pretty good defense and resistance, and very low speed. However, they make up for it with their weapon, which allows them to double anyone who has at least 35 speed. And most tanks nowadays in Ether raids have really high speed, so basically they're going to be guaranteed to double any one of your tanks. And with their insanely high attack, and especially if you give them something like Sturdy Impact or Mirror Impact, they're just going to be so hard to deal with, because they have pretty high defense and resistance, so it's hard to one-shot them, but they're also going to double you if you just tank them. So oftentimes the way to deal with Bramimond is to initiate into them and kill them before they can kill you first. Yeah, they're just so strong offensively, and they fit in well into an infantry pulse team as well. And their base kit is just so useful. It comes with an attack push, as well as lull attack res, as well as impenetrable dark. So honestly, Bramimond is just insane right out of the box, and there's not much you can do in terms of tanking. Because of Bramimond's insane offensive output, I'm gonna put them in S tier along with everybody else. Now, it may seem like I'm putting a lot of people in S tier, but honestly, all of these units are just so amazing, and any of them would fit in amazingly onto basically any Ether Raids team. Next up from Dark Season is Hel, who is the Queen of Hell herself, and Aerith's supposed mother. She is one of the more recently introduced mythics, and they actually switched up her weapon from when we saw her in the story to when we actually got her as a playable unit. She is quite good now, basically like a conditional miracle in her weapon, and she also has really high speed, pretty high attack, good defense, and pretty low resistance. But because of the fact that she comes with guard bearing, that can help mitigate the fact that she has lower resistance. So honestly, she is really hard to kill from full HP. Unless you're able to get something like a bolt tower to reduce her down to 1 HP, then it's going to be really easy to kill her because her weapon effect won't activate. However, if your Bolt Tower is either destroyed or doesn't reach her, it can actually be pretty annoying to deal with her. Because she fits in pretty well with a Fireball team and has pretty decent offensive output and can be pretty hard to kill, I'm gonna put her in A tier. Now, we probably haven't seen a lot of her yet in Ether Raids because she is so recent and has only been on one Mythic banner, but I predict as she's available more people are going to have her, and people are going to start getting more and more annoyed when they see her, because honestly, I've seen her a couple times and she is pretty damn annoying to face. Next up is Yune, who is one of the older defense mythics, and she's actually now fairly viable in Ether Raids because Hell is available in Dark Season as well, so you can now make a Fireball team with the two of them, which can actually be pretty decent. So I would say she has gotten better since Hell was released, because now you have more of an incentive to run her as well. She has a pretty unremarkable stat line, decent attack, really low speed, really low defense, and really good resistance. But her weapon does allow her to have guaranteed doubles if there is a penalty active on the enemy unit. However, she's going to be getting one-shotted by a lot of physical units because of her low defense, so giving her something like Sturdy Impact would make her a lot better and would probably bump her up a tier. However, if we're just talking about vanilla base kit out of the box Yune at +0, she is really not that good, and she's not going to be killing much. Because of that, I'm going to have to put her in B tier. Before Hell was released, I honestly probably would have put her in C tier because she is not that useful. However, I do think that with her base kit or with minimal skill investment, she's probably around a B tier. If you give her Sturdy Impact and merges and more support, I would probably bump her up a tier to A tier. However, as she is not that good. Last but not least is Sothis. She has been released for a while now, I believe over a year, so by now a lot of people I've seen have a decent amount of merges on her, and I'll be honest, with like +10 merges and maximum skill investment, she can probably be pretty good. However, as she comes out of the box, her attack and speed are really nothing to remark at, and honestly she kind of just hits like a wet noodle, even with her special series. I've personally never really had any problems facing her, and I consider her to be one of the least threatening mythics to face. Because of that, I'm going to put her in C tier. She is an infantry, so I guess she can help with infantry pulse teams, but honestly, like, I've never seen my Sothis on my defense team kill anyone, and I don't think that anyone with a +0 or +1 Sothis is going to be getting a lot of kills from their Sothis. So because of that, she is just not that powerful in my opinion, and deserves a spot in the bottom tier alongside Naga. So that is going to be it for this Mythic tier list. Please let me know in the comments if you disagree with anything that I said or if you would move anyone to a different tier. Please also don't forget to like and subscribe, as it helps a lot with the algorithm if you haven't already.